The crystal champagne flute shattered against marble floors as four men in ski masks burst through the ballroom entrance, moving with coordinated precision toward the woman in the emerald gown. Screams erupted across the packed charity gala as billionaire CEO Cassidy Rhodes found herself surrounded, trapped between attackers and the stage where she'd just pledged $10 million to veterans' causes. Then a quiet man from the back corner wearing a thrift store suit and serving appetizers on a volunteer tray moved like lightning itself, dropping all four assailants in less than 15 seconds, with techniques that left security professionals stunned. Blood spotted the white tablecloths as Cassidy stared at this stranger, who just saved her life with his bare hands. But the real shock came 30 minutes later when she discovered who Preston Ford really was, and the devastating choice he'd made 4 years ago that had cost him everything: his career, his reputation, and nearly his soul. Stay with me until the end of this incredible story, and comment your city below so I can see how far this tale has traveled. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Belmont Grand Hotel ballroom sparkled like a jewelry box come to life, with crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light across 500 of Ashford City's wealthiest citizens. The annual Hope Foundation Gala was the social event of the season, where tech moguls mingled with old money and everyone competed to see who could write the largest check for veterans' rehabilitation programs. Servers in crisp black uniforms weaved through the crowd with practiced elegance, carrying trays of imported champagne and hors d'oeuvres that cost more per bite than most people spent on entire meals. Preston Ford moved among them, but he didn't quite fit. His uniform was slightly too large, borrowed from the event coordinator's spare closet when the catering company came up short on staff. His shoes were polished but old, the kind you could find at thrift stores if you looked hard enough. At 38, his face carried lines that spoke of sleepless nights and hard decisions, and his hands bore scars that didn't come from kitchen work. He'd taken this last-minute volunteer position because the pay was decent for a single night's work, and his daughter Summer needed new textbooks for her advanced placement classes. At 16, she was brilliant enough to have scholarship offers from 3 universities. But those wouldn't kick in for another year. Until then, Preston did whatever honest work came his way, swallowing his pride with the same discipline he'd once used to swallow fear. The ballroom buzzed with a particular energy of wealth and philanthropy, mixing in equal measure. A jazz quartet played softly near the stage, their music barely audible over the hum of conversation. Ice sculptures depicting eagles and flags slowly melted into their silver basins, and the scent of expensive perfume mixed with the aroma of catered delicacies. Preston's eyes moved constantly, a habit he couldn't break even after 4 years of trying. He cataloged faces, exits, potential threats. The security details stationed at each entrance looked professional enough, but they were focused on the wrong things. They watched for obvious threats while missing the subtle ones, like the catering van that had arrived 20 minutes late, its driver nervous and sweating despite the air conditioning, like the 4 servers who'd arrived separately but kept making eye contact across the room, coordinating something. He told himself it was paranoia, told himself he was seeing patterns where none existed, the way he had for months after everything fell apart. But the tingle at the base of his skull, the same instinct that had kept him alive through situations he didn't like to remember, wouldn't quiet down. At the front of the room, Cassidy Rhodes took the stage to thunderous applause. The founder and CEO of TechVista Industries. She'd built a billion-dollar empire in cloud computing and artificial intelligence, becoming one of the youngest self-made female billionaires in the country. Her emerald gown probably cost more than Preston's car, and diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists. But what struck him most was the genuine warmth in her smile as she spoke about supporting veterans. "These men and women sacrificed everything for our freedom," Cassidy said, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "The least we can do is ensure they have the resources to rebuild their lives when they come home." Tonight, TechVista Industries is proud to pledge $10 million to the Hope Foundation's rehabilitation programs. The crowd erupted in applause. Champagne flutes rose in toast, and Preston saw one of the suspicious servers move, his hand to his waistband in a motion he recognized all too well. Time seemed to slow, the way it always did when violence was about to shatter the illusion of safety. Preston set down his tray with careful precision, his body already moving before his conscious mind finished processing the threat. He saw the 4 men simultaneously reach beneath their server jackets, saw them pull on ski masks that had been hidden in their pockets, saw them move toward the stage with the coordinated efficiency of a planned assault. The first scream cut through the air as a woman near the entrance spotted the masks. Then chaos erupted like a dam breaking. Guests scrambled away from the stage, overturning tables and sending champagne flutes crashing to the marble floor. The security guards reached for their weapons, but they were too far away, positioned at the perimeter rather than near the stage. The 4 attackers closed in on Cassidy, who stood frozen at the podium, her speech notes fluttering from her hands like wounded birds. They moved with military precision, creating a diamond formation that would be nearly impossible for security to penetrate without risking her life. The lead attacker pulled out not a gun, but a syringe, something that would leave no bullet casings, no loud gunshots to alert the entire building. Preston didn't think. Thinking had been his enemy ever since Atlantic City, since the choice that had destroyed everything he'd built. He simply acted, his body remembering what his mind had tried to forget. He covered the distance between his position and the stage in seconds, his path cutting through the panicked crowd like a knife through water. The nearest attacker turned just as Preston's shoulder connected with his ribs, sending them both crashing into the orchestra pit. The violin player barely managed to pull his instrument to safety as they tumbled past. Preston was on his feet first, his hands moving with practiced efficiency to pressure points that dropped the attacker without killing him. The syringe skittered across the floor, its contents spilling uselessly. The other 3 attackers converged on him, abandoning their careful formation. They'd trained for security guards and police response, not for someone who moved like he did. The second attacker swung a collapsible baton, but Preston ducked under it, using the man's momentum to throw him over his hip and into a table laden with auction items. Crystal vases exploded into glittering fragments. The third attacker was smarter, trying to grab Cassidy while Preston was occupied. But Preston had already calculated that possibility. His kick caught the man in the knee with surgical precision, hyperextending the joint without breaking it. The attacker went down hard, and Preston was there to ensure he stayed down, applying a blood choke that rendered him unconscious in seconds. The fourth attacker hesitated, seeing his team systematically dismantled by a man in an ill-fitting catering uniform. That hesitation cost him. Preston closed the distance, disarmed him with a wrist lock that made the man cry out in pain, and put him face first on the stage floor with enough force to discourage any further resistance. 15 seconds. 4 attackers neutralized. The ballroom fell silent except for the sound of scattered breathing and someone's sob being quickly stifled. Preston stood among the wreckage, his borrowed uniform torn at the shoulder, a thin line of blood on his cheek from where the baton had grazed him. His chest heaved with exertion, and his hands trembled slightly as the adrenaline began to fade. Around him, 500 of Ashford City's elite stared with expressions ranging from shock to admiration to fear. Cassidy Rhodes remained at the podium, one hand gripping it for support, her emerald gown somehow still immaculate despite the chaos. Her eyes were fixed on Preston with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. He'd spent 4 years trying to be invisible, and in 15 seconds, he'd made himself the center of attention for everyone in the room. Security finally arrived, weapons drawn, shouting commands that came far too late. Preston raised his hands slowly, making no sudden movements. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. "Wait," Cassidy's voice cut through the confusion, amplified by the microphone she still stood near. "He saved me. This man just saved my life." 2 hours earlier, Preston had stood in the cramped bathroom of his apartment, wrestling with the borrowed uniform and wondering if he'd made a mistake taking this job. The Belmont Grand Hotel was the kind of place where people like him usually only entered through service entrances, and even then, only when they had legitimate business. "Dad, your tie is crooked," Summer called from the living room of their 2-bedroom apartment in the Brookside district, one of those neighborhoods real estate agents called up and coming, which meant it was affordable because it hadn't come up yet. Preston emerged to find his daughter sitting at their second-hand dining table, surrounded by textbooks and her laptop. At 16, Summer had inherited her mother's sharp intellect and her father's stubborn determination. She'd been 12 when everything fell apart, old enough to understand that their life had changed forever, young enough to adapt in ways Preston still struggled with. "Better?" he asked, adjusting the tie. She looked up from her calculus homework, her dark eyes, so like her mother Elise's, scanning him critically. "Better. You look almost respectable." "Almost? The shoes give you away. But nobody looks at servers' shoes at these fancy events. Trust me. I've read enough about how wealth works. The invisible people stay invisible." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Preston smiled despite himself. Summer had developed a fascination with social dynamics and economics, probably because their fall from middle-class comfort to working-class struggle had given her a unique perspective. Her guidance counselor said she could write a compelling college essay about overcoming adversity. Preston hated that his failures had become his daughter's essay material. Mrs. Walsh next door said she'd check on you around 9. Preston said, grabbing his keys, "There's leftover pasta in the fridge. I'm 16, not 6. I'll be fine." Summer paused, then added more softly, "Be careful tonight, okay? I know these fancy events make you uncomfortable." She didn't know the half of it, couldn't know that putting Preston in a room full of wealthy people he was supposed to protect triggered every instinct he'd spent 4 years trying to suppress. But Summer had her own intuition, probably had since that terrible night when police officers appeared at their door with questions he couldn't answer and accusations he couldn't defend against. "Just serving appetizers, sweetheart. What could go wrong?" The words felt like tempting fate, but he kissed the top of her head and left before she could see the tension in his shoulders. The bus ride to the Belmont took 40 minutes through evening traffic. Preston watched the neighborhoods transform through the window, going from modest apartment complexes to renovated townhomes to the gleaming towers of downtown Ashford City. He'd once lived in one of those townhomes, back when he'd been someone else, someone who wore tailored suits instead of borrowed uniforms, someone whose daughter didn't have to worry about textbook money. The Belmont Grand Hotel rose 30 stories above the financial district, all glass and steel and old money. Preston entered through the service entrance, as instructed, where a harried event coordinator named Brielle Douglas barely glanced at him before thrusting a uniform into his hands. "You're late," she snapped, though Preston was actually 5 minutes early. "Sorry," he said automatically. "You learned not to argue when you needed the work. Bathrooms down the hall. Get changed. You'll be serving appetizers during the cocktail hour, then transitioning to champagne service during the main program. Don't talk to the guests unless they talk to you first. Don't drop anything. Don't stare at anyone. Basically, be invisible." Invisible. Preston had become an expert at that over the past 4 years. The ballroom staff consisted of 20 servers, most of them students from the local culinary school picking up extra cash. They eyed Preston with the polite disinterest of people who assumed he was just another middle-aged guy trying to make ends meet. They weren't wrong, but they also weren't entirely right. As the guests began arriving, Preston fell into the rhythm of the work. Offer tray, smile, politely, move on. The guests barely saw him, their eyes sliding past his face as if he were furniture. He'd once commanded rooms like this, had been the person everyone wanted to talk to. Now he was the person no one noticed. But he noticed everything. He noticed that the security detail, despite their professional appearance, had predictable patrol patterns. He noticed that the entrance security was checking invitations, but not bags thoroughly enough. He noticed which guests were actually philanthropists and which were there for the social networking, the way they positioned themselves near Cassidy Rhodes, like satellites orbiting a star. He noticed the 4 servers who'd arrived separately but kept exchanging glances across the room. Preston told himself it meant nothing, told himself that his instincts, once so reliable, had been corrupted by 4 years of paranoia and guilt. After Atlantic City, after the investigation that had cleared him legally but destroyed him professionally, he'd started seeing threats everywhere. Therapy had helped, but some habits died hard. Still, he watched the 4 men, noted how they moved with too much awareness for casual catering staff, noted how their eyes constantly tracked Cassidy Rhodes's position, noted the bulges under their jackets that might have been nothing, but might have been something. "You worked events before?" another server asked during a brief lull, a young woman named Adeline Scott who attended the Culinary Institute. "A few," Preston replied, keeping his answer vague. "You move different than the rest of us. More aware. My boyfriend's studying criminal justice, and he moves like that. Always watching exits and stuff." Preston forced a casual smile. "Old habits. I used to work security." "Cool. Why'd you stop?" "Because I made a choice that saved one life but let another die. And even though the law said I did everything right, the person who died had the wrong last name and the right connections. Because I became a cautionary tale, a news story, a LinkedIn profile that got passed over automatically. Because I went from protecting executives to serving them appetizers. And some days I'm not sure which version of me was real." "Career change," he said instead. Adeline accepted this with a shrug and moved off with her tray. Preston returned to his careful observation, still tracking the 4 suspicious servers, still feeling that instinctive warning that something was wrong. When Cassidy Rhodes finally took the stage to make her announcement, Preston positioned himself near the edge of the crowd, close enough to act if his paranoia proved justified, far enough away that he could still pretend he was just a server doing his job. He saw the way the 4 men's body language changed when she started speaking, saw them abandon their serving trays and begin moving with coordinated purpose. And when they reached for their waistbands, Preston Ford, who'd spent 4 years trying to be nobody, became exactly who he'd always been. Someone who stood between danger and the innocent. Someone who made choices when everyone else froze. Someone who was about to be invisible no longer. The moment hung suspended like a breath held too long. Preston's mind cataloged everything with the crystalline clarity that came when time seemed to slow down. 4 attackers moving in practiced formation toward Cassidy Rhodes. 500 potential hostages frozen in the first seconds of shock. Security guards positioned wrong. Would take them 8 to 10 seconds to reach the stage. Too long. Emergency exits blocked by panicked guests beginning to surge backward. The lead attacker's hand emerged from beneath his server jacket, gripping a syringe filled with clear liquid. Not a gun. Sophisticated. Quiet. Meant to incapacitate Cassidy without alerting the entire hotel. The other 3 attackers pulled ski masks over their faces with synchronized precision, their movements revealing training that went beyond simple thugs hired for intimidation. Preston's body moved before his conscious mind finished the analysis. 4 years of forced retirement, of deliberately suppressing every instinct he'd honed over a decade of executive protection work, evaporated like morning frost under sudden heat. His borrowed server jacket pulled tight across his shoulders as he launched forward, the tray of champagne flutes tumbling from his hands and shattering across marble floors. The sound of breaking crystal triggered the first screams. Guests scattered like startled birds, their designer gowns and tailored tuxedos suddenly impediments as they scrambled away from the stage. A woman in a silver dress stumbled over her heels, and Preston's hand shot out to steady her, without breaking stride, his eyes never leaving his targets. The nearest attacker registered Preston's approach a half-second too late. Preston's shoulder connected with the man's ribs just below the sternum, driving the air from his lungs and sending both of them tumbling into the orchestra pit. The violinist shrieked, clutching his instrument as they crashed through music stands. Sheet music fluttered through the air like confused snow. Preston rolled with the impact, his hands already moving to the pressure points he'd learned during his years with Sentinel Protection Group, back when he'd been considered one of the best in the business. His thumb found the nerve cluster below the attacker's ear, applying precise pressure that made the man's body go rigid before collapsing unconscious. The syringe clattered away, its contents spilling across the polished wood floor. 1 down, 3 to go. Elapsed time, 4 seconds. Preston vaulted back onto the stage level, his dress shoes finding purchase on the slick marble despite their worn soles. The second attacker was already swinging at him with a collapsible baton, the kind made from aircraft-grade aluminum that could crack skulls. Preston saw the trajectory, calculated the force, and dropped beneath it. The baton whistled over his head close, enough that he felt the air displacement. Using the attacker's own momentum, Preston grabbed the man's extended wrist and pivoted, executing a textbook hip throw that sent the attacker flying over his shoulder. The man crashed into the auction display table with spectacular effect. Crystal vases that had probably cost thousands exploded into glittering fragments. A bronze sculpture depicting an eagle in flight toppled and rang against the floor like a discordant bell. The attacker groaned, trying to rise, but Preston was already there. A strike to the solar plexus, followed by a sweep of the legs, and the man was down. Preston retrieved the baton, collapsing it and sliding it into his belt in one smooth motion. 2 down. Elapsed time, 8 seconds. The third attacker showed better judgment than his companions. Instead of engaging Preston directly, he lunged for Cassidy, who still stood frozen at the podium, her hands gripping the wood like it was the only solid thing in a tilting world. The attacker's fingers closed on her arm, yanking her toward him with enough force to tear the delicate fabric of her emerald gown. But Preston had anticipated this move, had spent his entire career thinking 3 steps ahead, calculating how attackers would adapt, where they'd redirect. His kick caught the man's knee from the side, hyperextending the joint with a sickening pop. Not broken, but damaged enough that the leg buckled. The attacker's grip on Cassidy loosened as he instinctively reached for his injured knee. Preston moved into the opening, his hand finding the back of the attacker's neck. He applied a blood choke, a technique that cut off blood flow to the brain without crushing the windpipe. 5 seconds of pressure, and the man slumped unconscious. Preston lowered him to the stage floor with surprising gentleness, making sure his head didn't hit the hard surface. 3 down. Elapsed time, 12 seconds. The fourth attacker finally showed the sense to recognize when a plan had failed catastrophically. He backed away from Preston, hands raised, eyes darting between his unconscious companions and the exits that were now blocked by arriving security guards. But his retreat path took him within reach of Cassidy, and Preston saw the calculation flash across his face. Hostage, bargaining chip, exit strategy. Preston closed the distance before the thought could become action. The attacker reached for something else in his jacket, possibly a weapon, possibly a phone. Preston didn't wait to find out. He caught the reaching hand in a wrist lock, applying torque that brought the attacker to his knees with a strangled cry of pain. "Don't," Preston said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of making life or death decisions. "It's over. Don't make me hurt you worse." The attacker's free hand moved toward his waistband. Preston sighed, adjusted his grip, and put the man face first on the stage floor, with enough controlled force to ensure compliance without causing serious injury. The attacker's mask had ridden up, revealing a young face, maybe mid-20s, twisted with pain and rage. "You ruined everything." The young man spat, his voice muffled against the floor. "She deserves what's coming, they all do." 4 down. Total elapsed time, 15 seconds. Preston stood among the wreckage of the elegant charity gala, breathing hard, his hands starting to tremble as adrenaline began its inevitable crash. His borrowed uniform was torn at the shoulder seam, and blood trickled from a cut on his cheek where the baton had come closer than he'd realized. Around him, 500 of Ashford City's wealthiest citizens remained frozen, their sophisticated social masks cracked by genuine shock. Security guards finally swarmed the stage, weapons drawn, shouting commands in that aggressive tone that came from arriving too late and compensating with excessive force. Preston raised his hand slowly, carefully, making no sudden movements. He'd been on both sides of this scenario enough times to know that adrenaline-charged security personnel with weapons drawn weren't particularly interested in nuance. On the ground, now, Preston complied, kneeling first, then prone, his hands behind his head. The marble floor was cold against his cheek, and fragments of broken crystal pressed into his chest. Above him, boots thundered past, and voices shouted conflicting commands. Someone stepped on his hand. Another guard's knee pressed into his back with unnecessary force. "Wait." Cassidy Rhodes's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The microphone she still stood near amplified her command across the ballroom. "Wait, that man saved my life. He's not one of them." He stopped all 4 attackers. The knee pressure on Preston's back eased slightly. But the guards didn't fully release him. He remained still, patient, knowing that this moment required careful handling. Through the forest of legs and overturned furniture, he could see event staff helping shocked guests toward exits, security guards zip-tying the unconscious attackers, and someone's abandoned phone recording everything. Of course, someone had filmed it. In the age of smartphones, heroism and catastrophe were equally likely to go viral. "Sir, I need you to stay down while we sort this out," a security supervisor said, his tone marginally less aggressive. "Can you tell me your name?" Preston's mouth went dry. Here it was, the moment his 4 years of carefully constructed invisibility would end. The moment his name would be run through databases and red flags would start appearing. The moment someone would say, "Wait, aren't you that guy from Atlantic City?" "Preston Ford," he said clearly, because running would only make things worse. "I was working as a server tonight." Cassidy appeared in his limited field of vision, kneeling beside him with complete disregard for her expensive gown on the debris strewn floor. Up close, he could see that her composure was a carefully maintained facade. Her hands trembled slightly, and her pupils were dilated with shock. "Thank you," she said simply. "Whatever happens next, thank you for saving my life." Preston met her eyes and saw something there he hadn't seen directed at him in 4 years. Respect, gratitude, recognition not of his past failures, but of his present actions. "Just doing what needed to be done," he replied. The security supervisor made a call on his radio, and Preston heard the words that confirmed his fears. "Run a full background check on a Preston Ford, and somebody get the police down here. We've got a situation." Around them, the ballroom slowly returned to a semblance of order. Paramedics arrived to check the unconscious attackers and treat minor injuries among the guests. Police officers in uniform began taking statements, their presence transforming the elegant venue into a crime scene. And somewhere, probably already, Preston's name was being entered into systems that would connect him to Atlantic City, to headlines he'd hoped were forgotten, to a past that was about to become very present. Summer would see this on the news. The thought hit him with the force of a physical blow. His daughter would watch footage of her father taking down 4 attackers in a ballroom full of billionaires, and she'd have questions he wasn't ready to answer. About who he used to be. About what happened in Atlantic City. About why they'd really moved to Ashford City and started over with nothing. "Mr. Ford?" A police detective appeared, notepad already out. "I'm Detective Landon Pierce. I need to ask you some questions about what happened here tonight." Preston nodded, finally allowed to sit up but not yet free to leave. As he began recounting the attack, his eyes kept drifting to Cassidy Rhodes, who stood surrounded by her own security detail and concerned board members. She was watching him with an intensity that suggested she was seeing more than just a server who'd gotten lucky. She was seeing someone who moved with training that went far beyond basic self-defense. Someone who'd assessed and neutralized 4 coordinated attackers with efficiency that spoke of extensive experience. Someone whose hands had known exactly where to strike, how much pressure to apply, when to stop. She was seeing who he really was beneath the borrowed uniform and the carefully cultivated invisibility. And Preston knew, with the certainty that came from years of reading people and situations, that his life was about to change again. Whether for better or worse remained to be seen, but the carefully constructed walls he'd built around his past were crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The ghost of Atlantic City was about to become front-page news in Ashford City, and this time, Preston Ford had nowhere left to run. The police station's interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Preston sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, his borrowed uniform replaced by a gray sweatshirt someone had found in the Lost and Found. The cut on his cheek had been cleaned and bandaged by a paramedic who'd worked in silence, eyes full of questions she didn't ask. Detective Landon Pierce sat across the metal table, his tablet displaying information that made his expression shift from professional interest to something more complicated. Recognition mixed with confusion, curiosity tempered by caution. Preston James Ford, Pierce read aloud. Age 38. Former senior protection specialist with Sentinel Protection Group, one of the most prestigious executive security firms on the East Coast. 12 years of service. Spotless record. Multiple commendations. Considered one of the best in the industry. He looked up. Until Atlantic City. Preston's jaw tightened. 4 years hadn't dulled the impact of those two words. I was cleared of all criminal charges, Preston said quietly. The investigation found I acted within protocols. Legally cleared, yes. Pierce agreed. But that's not quite the same as being found innocent in the court of public opinion, is it? The detective turned his tablet around, showing Preston a news article he'd read so many times he had it memorized. The headline still had the power to make his stomach clench. Security expert's impossible choice, billionaire's son, dead, while executive lives. Nathan Chambers, Pierce continued. 23 years old, son of real estate mogul Gregory Chambers. He was attending the Atlantic Technology Summit 4 years ago, when an armed man took 2 hostages in a service corridor. You were the protection specialist assigned to the summit. Preston closed his eyes, but the memory played anyway, as vivid as the day it happened. The gunman high on something, his hands shaking, his demands incoherent. 2 hostages kneeling before him. Nathan Chambers on the left, young and terrified, there because his father had insisted he start learning the family business. Juliana Tate on the right, 42 years old, CEO of a medical device company, mother of 3 young kids. The hostage taker gave you a choice, Pierce said, reading from the report. You had one clear shot. The angle only allowed you to save 1 hostage before he could execute both. You had 3 seconds to decide. I chose Juliana Tate, Preston said, his voice hollow. She had 3 children under the age of 10. Nathan was single, no dependents. In that moment, with that information, I made the choice I thought saved the most lives downstream. And you were right, by any utilitarian calculus, Pierce agreed. Juliana Tate went on to develop a revolutionary cardiac device that saved thousands of lives. Her children still have their mother. By the numbers, you made the correct decision. Try telling that to Gregory Chambers. The detective nodded slowly. Chambers is one of the wealthiest men in the country, has connections in media, politics, business. He used every resource at his disposal to destroy you professionally. Even though the investigation cleared you, even though the internal review board concluded you followed protocols perfectly, even though the district attorney declined to file charges. Preston's hands formed fists on the table. Chambers gave interviews calling me a murderer who chose money over family. Said I saved the CEO because her company had done business with Sentinel Protection Group. That wasn't true, but it didn't matter. The story was too good, too controversial. Security expert plays God, rich kid dies, working mother lives. The media ran with it for months. Sentinel Protection Group terminated your employment, Pierce read from the file. They said it was to protect the company's reputation. Assured me it wasn't personal, that I'd done everything right, but that my continued presence had become a liability. Clients were nervous. Some were canceling contracts. Preston's laugh was bitter. Turns out being proven right doesn't matter much when you're costing the company money. And after Sentinel, blacklisted. Officially, no one would say it outright, but every security firm I applied to suddenly had no openings. Every interview ended with, "We'll be in touch," and then silence. I tried consulting, but clients would Google my name and find the Atlantic City articles. One prospect told me directly they couldn't hire someone with that kind of controversy attached, regardless of the facts. Preston stared at the table's scarred surface. I had a wife and a 12-year-old daughter. Savings that I thought would last 6 months lasted 3 because legal fees ate through them faster than I expected. We lost our house. My wife Elise was already sick, early-stage breast cancer, and the stress didn't help. She died 18 months after Atlantic City, and I'll never know how much the financial strain contributed. The detective set down his tablet. "I'm sorry. For what it's worth, reading this file, I think you got a raw deal. Doesn't change anything. I'm still the guy who let a billionaire's son die. That's my legacy, no matter what the official reports say." Preston met Pierce's eyes. "So what happens now? You going to charge me with something? Assault? Operating outside my authority? Charge you?" Pierce actually smiled. "Ford, you saved one of the most prominent CEOs in this city from what appears to be a coordinated assassination attempt. The 4 men you stopped are currently being very uncooperative, but we've identified them as members of a group that's been making noise about tech companies destroying traditional industries. You're not being charged, you're being thanked." Preston absorbed this, not quite believing it. "Then why am I here?" "Because Cassidy Rhodes has been calling every 5 minutes demanding to speak with you. And because I needed to understand who you really are before I let you walk out of here." Pierce stood, gathering his materials. "You're free to go, Mr. Ford. There's someone waiting for you in the lobby." The Ashford City Police Department lobby was busy with the usual late-night parade of humanity. Preston emerged to find Cassidy Rhodes sitting on a bench, still in her emerald gown, though she'd added a designer coat against the evening chill. She looked impossibly out of place among the tired lawyers and bail bondsmen, like a jewel dropped in a parking lot. She stood when she saw him. "Mr. Ford." "Miss Rhodes, you didn't have to wait." "Yes, I did." She gestured to a quiet corner away from the main traffic. "I had my team research you while you were giving your statement. I know about Atlantic City. I know about the choice you made." Preston's defenses rose automatically. "Then you know I'm not someone you want associated with your company. The optics alone would be terrible." "The optics of what? A man who saved my life?" Cassidy's eyes flashed. "Or the optics of someone who made an impossible decision in 3 seconds and has been punished for it ever since, despite doing everything right? I let someone die. You saved someone who could be saved. There's a difference." She pulled out her phone, showing him an article. "I read Juliana Tate's interview from 2 years ago. She said you gave her 3 children their mother. She said the cardiac device her company developed wouldn't exist if you hadn't saved her that night, because she was the one who pushed the research forward. She said thousands of people are alive because of your choice. Nathan Chambers is still dead. Yes, and that's tragic. But in a situation where someone was going to die no matter what you did, you chose to save who you could. That's not murder. That's being human in an inhuman situation." Cassidy sat back down, and after a moment, Preston joined her. "Gregory Chambers destroyed you because he was grieving and needed someone to blame. The media crucified you because controversy sells. But that doesn't make you wrong." Preston shook his head. "You don't understand what it's like. Every job interview, every background check, every Google search, Atlantic City comes up. I went from one of the best protection specialists in the country to serving appetizers at charity galas. My daughter had to leave her school because other kids saw the news articles. My wife died thinking I'd failed our family. Did you fail them?" The question hung in the air. Preston wanted to say yes, wanted to carry that familiar weight of guilt like a comfortable burden. But Summer's voice echoed in his memory. From a conversation they'd had a year ago when she'd found him staring at old employment rejection letters. "Dad, Mom didn't think you failed us. She told me before she died that you were the bravest man she knew. That making hard choices was what you did, and loving you meant accepting that sometimes those choices would have terrible consequences. She was proud of you. I'm proud of you. When will you be proud of yourself?" "My daughter thinks I'm brave," Preston finally said. "I think I'm just a man who keeps making choices that hurt the people around me." Cassidy was quiet for a moment. "Tonight, 4 men tried to kill me. They had a plan, coordination, the element of surprise. Your protection saved my life in 15 seconds. Do you know what my security team said after reviewing the footage?" Preston shook his head. "They said it was the most efficient threat, neutralization, they'd ever seen outside of military special operations. They said you assessed, adapted, and acted with a level of expertise that suggested thousands of hours of training and real-world experience." She turned to face him fully. "Preston Ford, whatever Atlantic City took from you professionally, it didn't take your skills, it didn't take your instincts, and it shouldn't have taken your sense of worth. Miss Rhodes, I appreciate what you're saying, but I'm offering you a job." Preston blinked. "What?" "Head of Personal Security for TechVista Industries. Specifically, for me. My current team is good at looking intimidating and checking credentials. But tonight proved they don't see threats the way you do. They don't act the way you do." She named a salary that made Preston's head spin, plus benefits, housing assistance, and a full scholarship fund for Summer's college education. "You researched my daughter?" "I research everyone. It's how I built my company." Cassidy's expression softened. "I know she's brilliant. I know she got accepted to 3 universities, but can't afford to attend any of them. I know you're working multiple jobs trying to save enough. I can solve that problem." Preston stood abruptly. "I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's compensation for services rendered, and services I need going forward." Cassidy stood as well. "Those 4 men tonight? They're connected to a larger movement targeting tech executives. The police told me I'm likely still at risk. I need protection from someone who sees threats before they materialize. Someone who doesn't hesitate when action is required. Someone who's proven they'll put themselves between danger and the person they're protecting. I let someone die in Atlantic City. You saved someone who could be saved. Tonight, you saved me. How many times do you have to prove yourself before you believe you deserve a second chance?" Preston's phone buzzed. A text from Summer. "Dad, you're trending on Twitter. Someone filmed you at the gala. Are you okay? Please call when you can." He stared at the message, feeling the weight of visibility he'd spent 4 years avoiding. The video was out there. His name was circulating again. By morning, someone would make the Atlantic City connection, and the entire news cycle would start over. "I need to think about it," Preston said finally. "Of course. But Preston," Cassidy handed him a business card with her personal cell phone number. "Whatever you decide, thank you for tonight. You gave me a gift I can never fully repay my life. Everything else is just details." She walked away, her heels clicking against the police station floor, leaving Preston standing alone with a business card that represented everything he'd lost 4 years ago and wasn't sure he deserved to have back. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Summer. "I saw the video, Dad. You were amazing. I always knew you were a hero. When are you coming? Home?" Preston typed back. "On my way now, sweetheart." But as he stepped out into the Ashford City night, he wasn't sure which home he was heading toward: the cramped Brookside apartment where he'd hidden from his past, or the life Cassidy Rhodes was offering, where his past might finally become something other than a burden. The bus ride back to Brookside took Preston through streets that seemed different now, though nothing had actually changed except his visibility. Twice, passengers glanced at him with recognition, probably having seen the gala footage that was apparently spreading across social media. He kept his head down, hoodie pulled up, exhausted from the adrenaline crash and the weight of Cassidy Rhodes's offer. Summer was waiting up when he finally climbed the stairs to their apartment, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open to at least 20 tabs of news coverage. She looked up when he entered, and her expression cycled through relief, excitement, and concern in rapid succession. "You didn't tell me you were working at the Belmont Grand Hotel," she said, closing her laptop. "It was last minute. I didn't think it mattered." Preston set down his keys, suddenly aware of how the borrowed sweatshirt smelled like police station, and how the bandage on his cheek must look. "You should be asleep. It's past midnight. Dad, you stopped 4 armed men from killing one of the richest women in the country. Sleep wasn't really an option." Summer stood, moving to the kitchen. "I'm making tea. You look like you need it." While water heated on their ancient stove, Preston sank into the second-hand couch that had cost them $40 from a yard sale. The cushions had permanent indentations from previous owners, but after the plastic chairs at the police station, it felt like luxury. Summer returned with 2 mugs of chamomile tea, her mother's favorite. She'd kept the tradition alive, making tea whenever serious conversations were needed. The gesture made Preston's throat tight. "I've been reading about Atlantic City," Summer said carefully, settling beside him. "Some of the news articles about tonight mention it. They're calling you controversial. That's a polite word for it. They're also calling you a hero, again." She sipped her tea. "The woman you saved tonight, Juliana Tate, she posted on social media about you. She said you gave her family everything, and that anyone who criticizes your choice doesn't understand impossible situations." Preston had avoided social media for 4 years. The thought of Juliana Tate publicly defending him felt surreal. "Summer. About Atlantic City. I've never really explained. You don't have to." His daughter's voice was firm. "I was 12, but I wasn't blind. I understood that you saved one person and couldn't save another. I understood that the man whose son died was angry and powerful and took it out on you. Mom explained it before she got too sick. She said you were carrying guilt for something that wasn't your fault. Someone died because of my choice. Someone died because a man with a gun was going to kill them. You didn't make that situation, Dad. You just had to survive it and make a decision no one should ever have to make." Summer set down her mug. "Do you want to know what I remember most from that time?" Preston wasn't sure he did, but he nodded. "I remember you coming home after another failed job interview and still helping me with my homework. I remember you working overnight shifts at the warehouse so you could take me to school in the mornings. I remember you never once complaining, never once making me feel like our situation was anything but temporary." Her eyes glistened. "I remember you being my dad, even when the world was calling you a villain. You deserve better than what I've been able to provide. I have a father who taught me that doing the right thing doesn't always lead to good outcomes. But you do it anyway. That's better than having money or a big house or any of the stuff we lost." Summer wiped her eyes. "So when these news articles try to make you sound like you're damaged or controversial, I know they're wrong. You're just someone who had to make a choice most people will never face." Preston pulled his daughter close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling her warmth against his shoulder. When had she become so wise? When had she grown from the 12-year-old who'd cried when they moved to this apartment into this remarkable young woman who could articulate truths he couldn't see himself? "Cassidy Rhodes offered me a job," he said into Summer's hair, "head of personal security for her company. The salary is more than I made at Sentinel. She's offering to pay for your college." Summer pulled back, eyes wide. "Dad, that's incredible. Is it? Or is it a setup for another Atlantic City? Another situation where I have to choose, where someone gets hurt, where everything falls apart again?" Preston stood, pacing the small living room. "I spent 4 years becoming nobody, so I wouldn't have to make those choices anymore. Taking this job means stepping back into situations where people might die, where my decisions matter, where I could fail again. Or succeed again," Summer countered. "You stopped 4 attackers tonight, saved someone's life. That's not failure. Tonight was different. Tonight, I didn't have to choose. I could save her without sacrificing anyone else. Preston stopped at the window, looking out at Brookside's modest skyline. But what about next time? What if next time there are two people in danger and I can only save one? What if I choose wrong? What if you choose right? What if you save someone who goes on to do amazing things, like Juliana Tate did? Summer joined him at the window. Dad, you can't live your life afraid of making choices. That's not living. That's just existing. Existing kept us safe and miserable. You think I don't see? How you look at your old security manuals sometimes. How you watch protection specialists in movies and your body language changes. You miss it. You miss being good at something, being valued for your skills. She squeezed his hand. Mom wouldn't want you hiding forever. Preston closed his eyes, remembering Elise in better days. Before the cancer, before Atlantic City. She'd known what she was marrying when she'd said yes to a protection specialist. Had known the risks, the irregular hours. The reality that his job was to stand between danger and other people. Your mother told me once that she fell in love with my certainty, Preston said quietly. She said most people freeze when crisis comes, but I moved toward it. She thought it was brave. After Atlantic City, I thought it was arrogance. Maybe it was neither. Maybe it was just who you are. His phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Ford, this is Detective Pierce. Thought you should know, the 4 men from tonight are talking. They were planning to kidnap Miss Rhodes, not kill her. Ransom demand targeting tech executives. Your intervention likely saved her from something much worse than we initially thought. You did good work tonight. Preston showed Summer the message. She read it twice, then looked up at him with an expression that was pure Elise loving but unwilling to accept nonsense. You saved her from being kidnapped, tortured for ransom, maybe killed anyway when they got what they wanted. And you're standing here questioning whether you deserve a second chance. Summer shook her head. Dad, I love you, but sometimes you're incredibly stubborn about punishing yourself. I'm scared, Preston admitted, the words coming out before he could stop them. I'm terrified of being responsible for someone's safety again, of making another choice that destroys us. Then don't make it alone. Take the job. Use the resources of a billion-dollar company. Build a team. Do it better than you could at Sentinel. Summer's voice softened. And remember, you have me. I'm not 12 anymore. I can handle knowing your job is dangerous. What I can't handle is watching you waste your skills, serving appetizers when you could be saving lives. Preston's phone rang. Cassidy Rhodes's number flashed on the screen. He stared at it for 2 rings before Summer gently took the phone and answered, putting it on speaker. Miss Rhodes, this is Summer Ford, Preston's daughter. Summer, hello. Cassidy's voice was warm despite the late hour. I hope I'm not calling too late. You're offering my dad a job. I am. A job I think he's uniquely qualified for. He's scared, Summer said bluntly, ignoring Preston's sharp look. He thinks he'll fail again, like Atlantic City. He thinks he doesn't deserve the opportunity. There was a pause. Then Cassidy said, Summer, can I tell you something? In the 15 seconds your father was stopping those 4 men, I watched his face. He wasn't thinking about failure, or Atlantic City, or what might go wrong. He was thinking about keeping someone safe. That's not a man who's broken. That's a man who's been waiting for permission to be himself again. I think so, too, Summer said. But he needs to hear it from more than just his teenage daughter. Preston, Cassidy addressed him directly now. I know you're listening. I'm not offering you this job out of gratitude or pity. I'm offering it because you're the best, and I need the best. What happened in Atlantic City doesn't disqualify you. If anything, it proves you can make hard choices under pressure. That's exactly what I need. Preston took the phone from Summer. Miss Rhodes, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not accepting that answer tonight. You're exhausted. You've been through trauma, and you're not in a position to make rational decisions. Her tone was gentle but firm. Take the weekend, think about it, talk to Summer. Talk to whoever else you need to talk to. But Preston? Don't decide based on fear. Decide based on who you want to be. The call ended. Preston set down the phone, feeling Summer's expectant gaze. She's right, his daughter said. Who do you want to be, Dad? The guy who hides in Brookside, or the guy who saves lives? Preston didn't answer, but as he prepared for bed in their small apartment, Cassidy's business card sat on his nightstand like a promise or a threat, or maybe both. Saturday morning arrived with autumn sunlight streaming through their apartment's thin curtains. Preston had barely slept, his mind cycling between the gala, Cassidy's offer, and memories of Atlantic City that refused to stay buried. Around 6, he gave up on sleep and made coffee, settling at the kitchen table with his laptop. The news coverage was extensive. Someone had captured high-quality footage of the attack and his response, and it had been viewed millions of times across various platforms. The headlines varied from "Mystery Server Saves Billionaire CEO" to "Atlantic City Hero Resurfaces at Charity Gala." The comment sections were predictably divided between those praising his actions and those relitigating his past choice. He was reading a surprisingly balanced article from the Ashford City Tribune when Summer emerged, already dressed, despite early hour. "You're up early," Preston observed. "Couldn't sleep either. Too much excitement." She poured herself coffee, a habit she'd developed recently that made her seem more adult than Preston was comfortable with. "Have you decided about the job?" "Still thinking." A knock at the door interrupted them. Preston wasn't expecting anyone, and visitors to their building usually buzzed up from the entrance. He checked the peephole and froze. Gregory Chambers stood in their hallway. The real estate mogul was in his 60s now, his hair gone mostly gray, but he still carried himself with the confidence of someone used to owning rooms. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Preston's monthly rent, and his expression was unreadable. "Dad." Summer had noticed his reaction. "Who is it?" "Stay here," Preston said quietly, then opened the door, but didn't step aside to invite Chambers in. "Mr. Chambers." "Ford." Chambers' voice was gravel and exhaustion. "I need to talk to you." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please." The words seemed to cost him. "I've come a long way, just 5 minutes." Preston considered closing the door, considered all the reasons why talking to the man who'd spent 4 years destroying his reputation was a terrible idea. But something in Chambers' expression, a weariness that went beyond physical tiredness, made him step aside. Chambers entered the modest apartment, his eyes taking in the second-hand furniture, the small kitchen, the life that his crusade had helped create. If he felt any remorse, his face didn't show it. Summer stood by the kitchen table, protective and curious. Chambers looked at her for a long moment. "You must be Summer. You look like your mother. I saw her photo in one of the articles about tonight's incident." "My mom died 2 years ago," Summer said, her voice carrying an edge Preston had never heard before. "From cancer. While we were struggling financially because you destroyed my father's career." Chambers flinched. "I know. I'm sorry." "Are you?" Preston's voice was hard. "Because sorry doesn't pay medical bills, or bring back my wife, or give my daughter the stability she deserved." "No, it doesn't." Chambers moved to the window, looking out at Brookside with the same analytical gaze Preston had seen in Atlantic City. "I've spent 4 years blaming you for Nathan's death, convincing myself that if you'd made a different choice, my son would still be alive, using my resources to ensure you paid for that choice." "Why are you here?" Preston asked. Chambers reached into his jacket, pulling out a folded letter. "This week, I was going through Nathan's belongings, things I couldn't face after he died, boxes I'd had in storage. I found this." He handed the letter to Preston. It's dated 3 days before the Atlantic Technology Summit. He wrote it but never sent it. Preston unfolded the paper with reluctant hands. The handwriting was young, hasty, full of crossed-out words and second thoughts. Summer moved closer to read over his shoulder. "Dad," the letter began, I need to tell you something I've been afraid to say. I don't want to be in real estate. I know you've planned my whole future, but it's not what I want. I want to study music composition. I know that sounds ridiculous to you, that you'll say it's not practical, but it's what makes me happy. I'm terrified of disappointing you, but I'm more terrified of living a life that isn't mine. I don't know how to tell you this in person, so I'm writing it down. Maybe I'll give you this letter at the summit. Maybe I'll find the courage to just talk. I don't know. I just know I can't keep pretending to be the son you want instead of the person I am. Love, Nathan. Preston read it twice, the words blurring as his eyes stung. Summer's hand found his shoulder, squeezing gently. Chambers' voice was rough when he spoke again. I pushed him into real estate. Pushed him to attend that summit even though he didn't want to go. Pushed him to be someone he wasn't because I couldn't accept that my son wanted to write music instead of build empires. He paused. I blamed you because blaming myself was too painful. Mr. Chambers, let me finish. Please. Chambers turned from the window. I watched the footage from last night, not just the attack, but your interview with Detective Pierce afterward. I heard you tell him that you chose Juliana Tate because she had 3 young children, because the math of who would be more missed guided your decision in 3 seconds of impossible pressure. He pulled out his phone, showing Preston an article. Do you know what Juliana Tate's company developed after Atlantic City? A cardiac monitoring system that catches heart defects in newborns before they become fatal. It saved over 2,000 babies in 4 years. 2,000 families who didn't have to bury their children because you made a choice that let her live. That doesn't bring Nathan back, Preston said quietly. No, nothing brings him back. But I've spent 4 years destroying you for making a choice I couldn't have made myself, for doing a job that requires impossible decisions in seconds, for being brave enough to choose when I wouldn't have been. Chambers' composure finally cracked. I'm here because I owe you an apology. Because I turned my grief into a weapon and aimed it at the wrong person. Because my son deserved better than a father who couldn't accept him for who he was. And you deserved better than what I did to you. The silence in the apartment was complete. Somewhere in the building, a door closed. Traffic sounds drifted up from the street. But in their small living room, Preston Ford stood face to face with the man who'd been the architect of his professional destruction, hearing words he'd never imagined. Why now? Preston finally asked. Why not 2 years ago, or 1 year ago, or any time before last night? Because seeing you save that woman's life reminded me what you actually do. What you've always done. You stand between danger and the innocent. You make choices most people couldn't make, and I punished you for it because my pain needed somewhere to go. Chambers' eyes were wet. I can't undo the past 4 years. I can't give you back your career, or your wife's health, or your daughter's childhood stability. But I can stop actively hurting you. He pulled out another document, this one official, looking. This is a public statement I'm releasing Monday morning. It acknowledges that I was wrong to blame you for Nathan's death. It states clearly that you followed all protocols in Atlantic City, and that my campaign against you was driven by grief rather than justice. It won't fix everything, but it's a start. Preston took the document with numb hands, scanning the words that would reshape his public narrative. Summer read it too, her grip on his shoulder tightening. There's more. Chambers continued. I've established a foundation in Nathan's name to support people like him, young adults, trying to pursue creative careers against family pressure. The board has already approved a grant for Summer's college education, wherever she wants to go, studying whatever she wants to study. It's not charity. It's what Nathan would have wanted, supporting someone's dreams instead of crushing them. I don't. Preston's voice failed. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to forgive me. I don't expect either. Chambers moved toward the door. But you should know that your former colleagues at Sentinel Protection Group have been informed of my statement. Several have already reached out to me, saying they'd welcome you back. Your reputation in the industry will be restored. Mr. Chambers, Summer spoke up, her voice steady despite her tears. "Thank you for the college money. But what my dad needs isn't your foundation or your apology. What he needs is to forgive himself. He's been carrying your blame on top of his own guilt for 4 years, and it's destroying him." Chambers looked at the young woman, then at Preston. "She's right. I gave you a burden you didn't deserve. But Ford, whether you take Cassidy Rhodes's job, or return to Sentinel, or do something completely different, stop carrying my pain. Nathan's death wasn't your fault. It was the fault of a man with a gun and a father who couldn't see his son for who he really was." After Chambers left, Preston sat on their couch, the documents in his lap, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath him. Summer sat beside him, and they stayed that way for a long time, processing what had just happened. "He was right about one thing," Summer finally said. "You've been carrying his blame along with your own. Maybe it's time to put some of that weight down." Preston's phone rang. Cassidy Rhodes again. This time, when he answered, his voice was different, steadier. "Miss Rhodes, I've thought about your offer." "And?" Preston looked at Summer, who nodded encouragement. He looked at Chambers' statement, promising public vindication. He looked at the letter from Nathan Chambers, a young man who'd wanted to be himself and never got the chance. "I'll take the job," Preston said. "But I have conditions. I build my own team, my own protocols. I don't compromise on security even if it's inconvenient. And my daughter's education comes first, always. Done, done, and done." He could hear the smile in Cassidy's voice. "Welcome to Tech Vista Industries, Preston. We start Monday. First priority is upgrading my entire security infrastructure. Second priority is identifying who sent those 4 men last night, because I don't think this is over." After the call ended, Summer threw her arms around him. "I'm proud of you, Dad." "I'm terrified," Preston admitted. "Good. Means you care." She pulled back, her mother's wisdom shining through her young face. "But this time, you're not alone. You have a team, resources, and a daughter who believes in you. Oh, and apparently a billionaire real estate mogul who's going to tell the world you were right all along." Preston laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. "How did I end up with such a smart kid? Good genetics and better parenting." Summer stood, pulling him up. "Come on. If you're starting a new job Monday, we need to celebrate. And by celebrate, I mean we're going to the diner for breakfast, and you're ordering more than just coffee." As they prepared to leave, Preston caught sight of himself in the bathroom mirror. The same face that had looked back at him for 4 years, carrying weight and guilt and exhaustion. But something was different now. Lighter, maybe. Or maybe just less defeated. The ghost of Atlantic City would always be with him. Nathan Chambers' death would always be a weight he carried. But Gregory Chambers' apology and Cassidy Rhodes's faith had cracked open a door Preston thought was sealed forever. The possibility of redemption. The chance to be who he'd been before the fall. Or maybe someone better. Someone who'd learned that impossible choices came with impossible consequences. But that didn't mean you stopped making them. Someone who stood between danger and the innocent. Not because it was glorious or easy, but because it was who he was. Preston Ford, protection specialist, was coming back from the dead. And this time, he wasn't alone. Monday morning, Preston arrived at Tech Vista Industries headquarters in downtown Ashford City, wearing a suit he'd purchased over the weekend with an advance from Cassidy. The building was glass and steel, 40 stories of technological innovation, and his office, on the 38th floor, had a view that made his Brookside apartment feel like a different planet. His new team consisted of 6 former protection specialists he'd worked with at Sentinel, all eager to join once word spread that Preston Ford was back. They spent the morning reviewing security protocols, and Preston immediately identified 17 critical vulnerabilities. "Your executive elevator has a bypass code that hasn't been changed in 3 years," he told Cassidy during their afternoon briefing. "Your parking garage has blind spots in camera coverage. Your personal driver uses the same route every morning. These aren't just problems, they're invitations. Fix them, Cassidy said simply. Whatever you need. By Wednesday, Preston had implemented new protocols that made Cassidy's board of directors complain about inconvenience. By Thursday, those complaints stopped when Detective Pierce called with disturbing news. The 4 men from the gala finally talked, Pierce said over the phone. They were hired, through an encrypted messaging service, by someone calling themselves the Architect. This person has been coordinating attacks against tech executives for 6 months. Cassidy Rhodes was target number 3. Preston felt ice form in his stomach. Who were targets 1 and 2? Target 1 survived with minor injuries. Target 2 didn't. Pierce paused. Preston, the Architect has a pattern. They research their targets extensively, find personal connections to exploit. The 4 men at the gala, all former employees of companies TechVista acquired. But here's what worries me. The Architect sent a message after the gala attempt failed. What message? Preston Ford is an interesting variable. Let's see how he handles protecting what he truly values. Pierce's voice was grim. They're not going after Cassidy anymore. They're going after you through her, or through Summer. Preston's hand tightened on the phone. Summer's at school. I have protection on her. Good. Keep it that way. We're working on tracing the Architect, but whoever this is knows how to stay hidden. Pierce hesitated. There's something else. We found a connection to Atlantic City in the Architect's communications. References to impossible choices. To justice for those left behind. Preston, I think this person knows about Nathan Chambers. After the call ended, Preston immediately contacted the team member he'd assigned to Summer's school. Everything was fine. She was in calculus class, unaware of the threat circling closer. Cassidy appeared in his office doorway. I heard Pierce's update through security channels. This Architect person is escalating. They're making it personal. That's when people make mistakes. Preston pulled up surveillance feeds from TechVista's various properties. We need to anticipate their next move. They failed to kidnap you, so they'll try something different. Something that hurts more than money. They'll go after Summer. Preston met her eyes. That's what I would do if I wanted to destroy someone like me. Take away the thing that matters most. Force an impossible choice. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. When he opened it, his blood went cold. It was a photo of Summer leaving her calculus class, timestamp from 15 minutes ago. The angle suggested it was taken from inside the school. The message read, "Hello, Preston. Remember Atlantic City? Remember having to choose? Let's play that game again. But this time, the stakes are more personal. You have 48 hours to figure out who I am and stop me. If you fail, someone you love will pay the price. And unlike Atlantic City, I won't give you the mercy of a clean choice. You'll have to watch while I take everything." Tick-tock. The Architect. Preston was already moving, his team mobilizing around him. Get Summer out of that school now. Full protective detail. Cassidy, you're going to a secure location. No, Cassidy said firmly. I'm not hiding while this person threatens your family. We face this together. This isn't your fight. You made it my fight when you saved my life. She grabbed her phone, already calling her own security. Besides, I have resources you need. Money, technology, connections. The Architect wants to play games? Let's show them what happens when they threaten the wrong people. Preston's phone rang. Summer school. The principal's panicked voice, reporting that Summer had left campus with a man claiming to be her father's colleague, showed credentials that looked legitimate. She's gone, Preston said, the words like broken glass in his throat. The Architect has Summer. Cassidy's face went pale, but her voice remained steady. Then we get her back. Whatever it takes. Detective Pierce arrived at TechVista within 20 minutes, bringing FBI resources and a grim reality. The credentials used to take Summer were perfect forgeries of your company's security badges. The architect has access to information they shouldn't have. Preston, I think this person has been planning this for months, maybe since Atlantic City. Then they made a mistake, Preston said, his voice cold and controlled. They think I'm the same man who froze in Atlantic City, who second-guessed every decision. But I'm not. And they just gave me 48 hours to find them. He looked at his team, at Cassidy, at Pierce. We have 2 days to save my daughter and stop whoever's been terrorizing this city. We don't sleep until it's done. The hunt for the architect had begun, and this time Preston Ford wasn't the prey. He was the hunter. The breakthrough came at hour 36, when Preston's tech specialist found a digital fingerprint in the architect's encrypted messages. The trail led to an abandoned industrial complex in the Riverside district, a maze of warehouses that had once housed manufacturing plants before automation made them obsolete. It's a trap, Cassidy said, studying the blueprints her team had pulled up. They want you to come. I know, Preston replied, checking his weapon. But Summers in there. His team had assembled with military efficiency. 6 protection specialists, all former Sentinel employees who'd worked with Preston before Atlantic City. Detective Pierce had brought FBI tactical support, though they'd agreed to let Preston lead since the architect had made this personal. They'll have surveillance on all approaches, said Xavier Grant, Preston's second in command. We go in loud, they hurt Summer. We go in quiet, they're expecting that too. Preston studied the complex layout, his mind calculating angles and possibilities. Then we give them what they expect and hit them with what they don't. Xavier, take Team 1 through the east entrance, make noise, draw their attention. Pierce, FBI positions for containment, no one leaves this complex. Cassidy, don't even try to leave me behind, she interrupted. I'm coming. You're not trained for tactical operations. I'm trained to think strategically and adapt quickly. Plus, the architect made this about me too. I'm an asset, not a liability. Preston wanted to argue, but he recognized the determination in her eyes. It was the same stubborn resolve that had built a billion-dollar company from nothing. They moved on the complex at dusk, using the failing light as cover. Xavier's team hit the east entrance with flashbangs and coordinated aggression, creating enough chaos to draw attention. Preston led his smaller team through a drainage culvert that bypassed the main security, an entrance he'd identified from studying old city infrastructure maps. Inside, the warehouse was a nightmare of shadows and blind corners. Industrial equipment cast strange shapes in the dim emergency lighting. Preston moved with practiced silence, Cassidy close behind him, her breathing controlled despite obvious fear. Summers' signal is coming from the central building, whispered Nolan Curtis, their tech specialist, monitoring the tracker they'd secretly embedded in Summers' school backpack months ago. Second floor, northeast corner. They cleared the first floor systematically, finding evidence of recent occupation but no people. Whoever the architect was, they'd planned this carefully. Too carefully. It's quiet, Cassidy whispered. Where are the guards? Preston's instinct flared a warning. Back. Now, the explosion ripped through the floor where they'd been standing seconds before, flames erupting with concussive force. Preston grabbed Cassidy, pulling her behind a concrete pillar as debris rained down. His team scattered, finding cover. Weapons ready. Welcome, Preston. A voice echoed through, speakers hidden in the warehouse. Male, distorted by electronics, but carrying an edge of familiar anger. Did you think it would be easy? That I'd just let you walk in and take her? Let Summer go, Preston called out. Your issue is with me. My issue is with everyone who makes impossible choices and calls it justice. The voice's distortion couldn't hide the rage beneath. You saved Juliana Tate and let Nathan Chambers die. You called it mathematics, utilitarian ethics. But what about the people who lose in your equations? Preston's mind raced through possibilities. Someone connected to Nathan Chambers. A family member Gregory hadn't mentioned. Nathan had a brother, Cassidy whispered, having reached the same conclusion. Younger brother, early 20s. He dropped out of college after Nathan died, disappeared from public records. Carter Chambers, Preston said, the pieces clicking together. Nathan's younger brother by 5 years. He worshipped Nathan. Blamed me when he died. Smart man, Carter's voice confirmed. While my father spent 4 years publicly destroying you, I spent 4 years learning how you think, how you operate. I studied your every case at Sentinel, every decision, every choice. I became an expert in Preston Ford. Another explosion, this one closer. The building shook. And Preston heard his team, reporting in over comms. Multiple attackers. Coordinated assault. Professional tactics. You taught me that impossible choices reveal who people really are, Carter continued. So here's yours. Summer is on the second floor with enough explosives to bring down this entire section. I'm in the East Building with Cassidy Rhodes's elderly parents, who I collected this morning. You have 5 minutes before I detonate both locations. You can reach one, not both. Your protection team can't reach either in time. Preston's blood turned to ice. Cassidy gasped beside him. My parents. They were supposed to be at their retirement home in Florida. Choose, Preston. Carter's voice rose to a shout. Your daughter or 2 innocent elderly people? Mathematics and ethics. Who's worth more? Show me how you make impossible choices. Preston's mind worked frantically. 5 minutes. 2 locations. His team scattered by the explosions. No time for rescue operations at both sites. This was Atlantic City again, but worse. This time, it wasn't a stranger's son, it was Summer. Dad? Summer's voice came through the speakers, terrified but trying to stay calm. Don't worry about me. Save them. I love you. Cassidy grabbed his arm. My parents are 80 years old. Preston, they've lived full lives. Summer's 16. You know what the choice has to be. Did he? In Atlantic City, he'd chosen based on mathematics 3 young lives versus 1. But this was his daughter, his Summer. The person who'd kept him sane through 4 years of hell. How could he possibly make this choice again? Then he remembered what Summer had said the night Cassidy offered him the job. Don't make it alone. Take the job. Use the resources. Build a team. Preston activated his comm. Xavier. East Building. 2nd floor. Cassidy's parents. You have 4 minutes. On it. Xavier responded instantly. Pierce. I need FBI to breach from the north, distract Carter's people. Already moving. Pierce confirmed. Preston turned to Cassidy. Your security system, you said you have drones for facility monitoring? Yes, but can they carry weight? Understanding flashed in her eyes. She pulled out her phone, fingers flying. The industrial inspection drones can carry 50 pounds. I have 3 within range. Get them here. Now. Preston was already moving toward the stairs. Nolan, I need schematics of the 2nd floor, specifically the northeast corner. Sending to your phone now. 2 minutes left. Preston hit the stairs at a run, his mind calculating trajectories and timing. The industrial drones arrived through a broken skylight. Their rotors humming, Cassidy directed them with practiced efficiency despite her shaking hands. Summer. Preston reached the 2nd floor, seeing his daughter tied to a chair surrounded by enough C4 to vaporize the building. I'm getting you out. The timer, Dad. I see it. 90 seconds. Preston worked on her restraints while simultaneously rigging one of the drones with a harness. This is going to be rough, sweetheart. Hold on. 60 seconds. He got Summer free and into the harness. The drone strained under her weight but held. Go. Out the window. The drone lifted Summer through the broken window just as Preston's comm crackled. We have the parents, Xavier reported. Clear of the East Building. 30 seconds. Preston ran for the stairs, but Carter's voice stopped him. You think you won? Carter Chambers appeared from the shadows, weapon drawn. You think you get to save everyone this time? Preston turned slowly. Carter, your brother wouldn't want this. You don't get to say his name. Carter's hand shook. You let him die. I made a choice in 3 seconds that haunts me every day, but I'm done letting it destroy everyone it touches, including you. Preston took a step forward. Nathan wrote a letter to your father before he died, about wanting to be himself instead of what others expected. He'd hate what you've become in his name. 15 seconds. The explosives would detonate, killing them both. Come with me, Preston said, extending his hand. We can both walk away. For a moment, something human flickered in Carter's eyes. Then hardened resolve replaced it. Some choices can't be undone. He raised the gun. Preston moved faster, closing the distance, disarming Carter with techniques that were pure muscle memory. They crashed through the door together as the explosives detonated behind them, the blast wave throwing them down the stairs in a tangle of limbs and debris. Preston woke to smoke and ringing ears. His body screamed with impact pain, but he was alive. Beside him, Carter Chambers lay unconscious, bleeding from a head wound but breathing. The building groaned ominously. Structural supports compromised by the explosion. Preston. Cassidy's voice cut through the haze. She appeared through the smoke with Nolan, pulling at debris. The building's coming down. We need to move. Preston stood with difficulty, every muscle protesting. Through the smoke, he could see 2 paths. To the left, the main exit where his team waited, where Summer was safe with the FBI. To the right, a secondary stairwell that led to the roof where a helicopter could extract them. But the building was collapsing faster than anticipated. The explosion had destabilized more than Carter had planned. One path would save Preston and Cassidy. The other would allow them to drag Carter's unconscious body to safety. Not both. The ceiling was already cracking, debris beginning to fall. Atlantic City again. A choice between lives, but this time, Preston Ford had learned something. Cassidy, take the main exit. Get to safety. Not without you. I'm not asking. He moved toward Carter's unconscious form. This time, I save everyone. Or die trying. No more mathematics. No more impossible choices. I'm done sacrificing people. Preston, you can't carry him alone. But Nolan was already beside him, helping lift Carter. I didn't sign up with you to make easy choices, boss. Let's move. They dragged Carter toward the secondary stairs as the ceiling collapsed behind them, flames licking at their heels. Cassidy ran ahead, clearing debris, her designer clothes ruined but her determination absolute. The stairwell was a nightmare of smoke and failing structure. Each step felt like it might be the last before everything came down. Carter's dead weight made progress agonizingly slow. Leave me, Carter mumbled, consciousness returning. Let me die. It's what I deserve. Nobody deserves this, Preston grunted, pulling him higher. And I'm not letting anyone die on my watch. Not today. They burst onto the roof as the building shuddered violently. Pierce's helicopter hovered 50 feet away, unable to get closer because of the smoke and heat. The jump was impossible, the distance too far. Preston's mind raced through options, all of them terrible. Then he saw it, the old crane system used when the warehouse was operational. Still intact, arm extending over the gap. Cassidy, can you operate that? It's from the 1,970 seconds, and probably hasn't moved in years, but... She was already running to the control booth. The crane groaned to life, its arm swinging toward them with aching slowness. The building lurched beneath them, fire erupting. Through the stairwell they'd just escaped. We're not going to make it, Nolan said calmly. Yes, we are. Preston secured a cable harness around Carter. Cassidy. Swing the arm over the helicopter. She adjusted controls with hands that remembered operating machinery from her early days building Tech Vista from nothing. The crane arm swung over Pierce's helicopter, just as the roof began to cave in beneath them. Go. Preston shoved Carter off the edge, the harness catching him, swinging him toward the helicopter where FBI agents grabbed him. Your turn, Cassidy yelled. But the roof was collapsing too fast. Preston grabbed both Cassidy and Nolan, all three of them tangled in the remaining harness, as the building fell away beneath their feet. They swung in a wild arc, slamming into the helicopter's side. Hands grabbed them, pulled them in, and they collapsed in a heap on the helicopter floor as the warehouse complex exploded into flames below. Summer's face appeared above him, tears streaming. "Dad, you scared me to death." Preston pulled his daughter close, breathing in smoke and relief. Around him, Cassidy was crying, Nolan was laughing with shock, and Carter Chambers was being restrained by FBI agents, alive but defeated. "You saved him," Carter said, staring at Preston with disbelief. "After everything I did, you saved me." "Why?" Preston met his eyes. "Because in Atlantic City, I learned that choosing who dies destroys you. Today, I learned that choosing who lives saves you." He touched Summer's hair. "Your brother's death wasn't my fault, and it wasn't yours. But the choices we make after tragedy, those are on us. I chose to carry guilt for 4 years. Today, I chose different." Pierce landed the helicopter at a secure FBI facility. Paramedics swarmed them, treating injuries and smoke inhalation. Carter was taken into custody, facing charges that would put him away for decades. But as they loaded him into the ambulance, his eyes met Preston's one last time. "I'm sorry," Carter said simply. "For all of it." Preston nodded. "Me too." Later, as the sun set over Ashford City, Preston stood with Summer and Cassidy on the roof of Tech Vista headquarters. The warehouse district still smoldered in the distance, a reminder of how close they'd come to different endings. "You broke the pattern," Cassidy said quietly. "The impossible choice that's haunted you for 4 years. This time, you refused to choose. You saved everyone. Almost got us killed." Preston replied. "But didn't. That's what matters." Summer leaned against her father's shoulder. "Mom would be proud. Not because you were a hero, but because you finally forgave yourself." Preston thought about Elise, about Nathan Chambers, about all the ghosts he'd carried. They were still there, would always be there, but they felt lighter now. Not forgotten, but accepted as part of who he was, someone who made impossible choices and lived with the consequences, good and bad. "The FBI says the Architects Network is dismantled," Cassidy said. Carter was the mastermind, but he had help from others who'd lost everything to tech acquisitions. "They're all in custody now." "Good," Preston said. "But there will always be others. More threats, more dangers, more situations where choices have to be made. And you'll be ready," Summer said confidently. "Because you're not running anymore." She was right. Preston Ford had spent 4 years running from who he was, trying to become invisible, to escape the weight of Atlantic City. But tonight, standing between his daughter and the woman whose life he'd saved, he finally understood what Elise had tried to tell him before she died. You couldn't outrun yourself. You could only choose to be better. The ghost was gone. The guardian remained. And this time, Preston Ford was ready for whatever came next. 3 months after the warehouse siege, Preston stood in Arlington Cemetery beside a simple headstone. Nathan Chambers, beloved son and brother, taken too soon. Fresh flowers already decorated the grave. Gregory Chambers visited weekly now, mourning not just his son's death, but the years he'd wasted in misdirected rage. "I made my peace with your father," Preston said to the stone. "Took me 4 years, but I finally understand what you would have wanted. Not revenge or blame, just people moving forward." A hand touched his shoulder. Cassidy Rhodes, no longer just his employer but something closer to family, stood beside him. Summer waited by the car, giving him space but offering silent support. "Carter's sentencing is next week," Cassidy said quietly. "His lawyers are arguing diminished capacity, trauma from losing his brother. He'll probably get 15 years instead of life." "Good," Preston replied. "Prison, therapy, a chance to become someone other than his grief. That's more than revenge would have given anyone." They walked back to the car, where Summer waited. Earbuds in. Working on a college application essay. She'd been accepted to MIT's early admission program, With full scholarship funding from both Nathan Chambers Foundation and Tech Vista Industries, the financial burden that had hung over Preston for years had evaporated, replaced by the surreal reality of his daughter choosing between prestigious programs. Writing about impossible choices again? Preston asked as they drove back to Ashford City. Writing about second chances? Summer corrected. About how the worst moments don't define us unless we let them. My guidance counselor says it's the best essay she's read in 20 years. Preston caught Cassidy's amused smile in the rearview mirror. Over the past 3 months, the three of them had formed an unlikely family unit. Cassidy frequently joined them for dinner at Preston's new apartment, a significant upgrade from Brookside that Summer had decorated with enthusiasm. They'd developed rhythms and routines, inside jokes, and comfortable silences. Board meeting tomorrow, Cassidy reminded him. They want to discuss expanding your security protocols to our overseas operations. I'll prepare a presentation, Preston said, though they're still going to complain about inconvenience. Let them complain. They're alive to do it. Tech Vista's security overhaul had become an industry standard. Other tech companies were reaching out, asking Preston to consult on their systems. Sentinel Protection Group had formally apologized and offered him a senior partnership, which he'd politely declined. His new life was in Ashford City, building something better than what he'd lost. That evening, Preston found himself on his apartment balcony, watching the city lights flicker to life. Summer was inside video chatting with her MIT advisor. Cassidy had stayed for dinner and was helping with dishes, insisting despite Preston's protests that billionaires were perfectly capable of operating dishwashers. His phone buzzed. A message from Gregory Chambers. Thank you for visiting Nathan. It means more than you know. Carter asked if you'd visit him before sentencing. No pressure, but he'd like to apologize in person. Preston considered it, then typed back, I'll be there. Cassidy appeared on the balcony, 2 cups of coffee in hand. Penny for your thoughts? Thinking about how different everything is from a year ago. I was serving appetizers, hiding from my past, convinced I didn't deserve a future. And now? Now I have a daughter, heading to MIT, a job that matters, friends who see me as more than my worst moment. He accepted the coffee. Now I have a life worth living. You always had that, Cassidy said gently. You just needed permission to believe it. Summer joined them, squeezing between them at the railing. Group photo, she announced, holding up her phone. For my MIT housing application, they want pictures of family. They posed together, 3 people brought together by violence, but bonded by choice. In the photo, Preston was smiling, genuinely smiling for the first time in years. Later, alone in his room, Preston opened a box he'd kept hidden since Atlantic City. Inside were his commendations from Sentinel, photos with his old team, and a letter from Juliana Tate thanking him for saving her life. He'd been too ashamed to read it before. Now, he read every word, letting himself accept that his choice had mattered, that lives saved counted as much as lives lost. At the bottom of the box was a photo of Elise from their wedding day, her smile bright with hope for their future. Preston touched the image gently. I'm okay now, he whispered. I'm finally okay. The ghost of Preston Ford, the man broken by Atlantic City, was gone. In his place stood someone stronger, a father, a protector, a man who understood that impossible choices didn't make you a villain or a hero, just human. Summer appeared in his doorway. Dad? You okay? Yeah, sweetheart. Just saying goodbye to some old ghosts. Good, she said firmly, because we have brunch with Cassidy tomorrow, and I'm not letting you be late because you're too busy feeling guilty. Preston laughed, closing the box and putting it away, not thrown out, but no longer a shrine to his failures. The past would always be part of him, but it no longer defined him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new moments where choices had to be made. But Preston Ford was ready now, not because he'd forgotten Atlantic City, but because he'd learned to carry it without letting it crush him. The warrior had returned. The Guardian had emerged, and this time, Preston Ford was finally, completely, home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.